Chapter 761. Li Tianlan took a deep look at military counselor. It was an accident that the other party suddenly came here, and his suggestion was even more of an accident. He had been imprisoned in the desert prison for a year, especially in the last 6 months. All his energy was focused on martial arts, and he did not pay attention to anything in the outside world, nor did he express any opinion on other things. Under such circumstances, military counselor suggested that he stay here for a while. Did he mean that the outside world was still stable? Moreover, if he could say such a thing, from another perspective, could it be that he could leave at any time now? What happened in the outside world in the past 6 months? Tell me your reason. Li Tianlan looked at him and said calmly. In fact, half a year ago, President Li Huaqing talked to Minister Dongqing about this issue. In principle, he has agreed not to restrict you, but the news was suppressed by Minister Dongqing. In the past 6 months, Jianghu state has been very lively. A few days ago, the president talked to the minister again about this issue, but the minister still did not agree. But there is news that in a few days, the other party should send a heavyweight to invite you out of prison in person. Military counselor said softly, but the minister and I hope you can stay here for the time being. I'm asking for your reason. Li Tianlan pulled out a special military cigarette, lit it, and said softly. Because of freedom. Military counselor said seriously, if there is no accident, the rumor is likely to be true, and it may be that Hua Xingyang personally comes to the desert prison to invite you out of prison. The other party is very sincere, but I hope you can refuse, because the real freedom is in your own hands. Military counselor picked up a stack of documents from the side and handed them to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Hua Xingyang personally came to the desert prison to invite him out of prison. This could indeed be said to be the greatest sincerity of the academics and the prince group. Hua Xingyang was not an ordinary member of Jianghu state, but one of the 9 directors, the second in command of the cabinet, and the leader of the academics. He could represent the will of both sides. To a certain extent, his coming was tantamount to giving Li Tianlan enough face. As long as he nodded, the matter of Qi Mulan could be completely over. He reached out to take the documents handed over by military counselor and glanced at them. Most of the information was about the more important things that happened in the past 6 months, covering a wide range of fields. On the 3rd day of February, the Wang family of Beihai launched a search involving the entire province. The search lasted for a week, and nearly 6,000 intelligence agents of various forces lurking in Beihai were arrested one by one. Wang Xingxiao refused the requests of the major forces to ransom them. He personally executed all the intelligence agents with a sword, and the blood completely dyed Beihai. On the 12th day of February, Xia Zhi secretly entered the hidden Dragon Sea to visit Li Huaqing. The 23rd day of February. The plan to recall the first batch of veterans of the North Sea Legion thus drew to a close. During this time, close to 100,000 veterans of the North Sea Legion had been re-enlisted. Beihai Conan. Beihai officially launched its conscription plan, with an estimated recruitment of 800,000 soldiers. In early March, Jianghu state held a parliamentary meeting. Dongqing Wudi strongly supported the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group. In mid-March, Qingzhou province, known as the backyard garden of the giant group, changed its commander. Tian Su, the speaker of Qingzhou, was transferred to Yuzhou. The reputation of the Tian family of the giant group declined greatly. The speaker of Qingzhou was a young man from the academics. At the end of March, Zhou Yunhai, the leader of the North Group, fired at the giant group in person, with the full support of the academics and the Prince Group. In early April, the deputy minister of the police department close to the giant group was transferred. In the same month, the Jianghu State Conference was held. The council rejected Dongqing Wudi's proposal that Bai Qingzhao serve as the Secretary General of the Army Headquarters. The person in charge of a large fleet in Beihai of Jianghu State was taken over. A storm swept through the military without warning, and a vice-admiral with real power in the navy fell from his horse. The North conglomerates suddenly took action, and Zhou Yunhai used this game to completely stabilize his authority in the police department. At the same time, he took over the military power of Northern City. At the end of April, the boss of a large state-owned enterprise retired early, and the boss of a large bank in Jianghu state was secretly investigated. At the beginning of May, the Wang family of Beihai's 3 listed companies in Huading, Wuyue, and Yuzhou were suppressed, and a large number of shares were quickly annexed. In mid-May, after Su Xinghe, the governor of the Southeast Group, was implicated and transferred from his current post because of the acquisition of the listed company. At the same time, Yu Chuanguang, the mayor of Huading and a close friend of Wang Xiaoyao, was transferred to Wuyue as the governor. Zhang Xiaohua, the director of Huading and the minister of supervision, was transferred to the Ministry of Supervision in Yuzhou. A capable general of the North Group was transferred to Huading as the mayor. From May of this year, all the achievements of the Southeast Group in plotting against Huading for several years were completely destroyed. At the same time, because Yu Chuanguang, who stood beside Wang Xiaoyao, had a firm stand, he cooperated with Wang Qinglei tacitly after he was transferred to Wuyue. For the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, when their achievements in Huading were destroyed, they officially lost control of Wuyue. For hundreds of years, this had been the most developed province in Jianghu state. It had been controlled by the Southeast Group, and it was their strongest fortress and back garden. For hundreds of years, until May of this year, Wuyue province was lost. This could be said to be the heaviest loss suffered by the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai in recent decades. Within the Southeast Group, Wang Qinglei had completely fallen out with Yi Dongsheng. He grasped Wuyue tightly and was ready to make a move. The academics and the prince group seemed to be satisfied for the time being. They temporarily shifted their target from the Southeast Group, and all the firepower was aimed at the giant group at the same time. A storm. The North Group. It was still the North Group. The North Group, which seemed to have tasted the sweetness, once again became the vanguard. After the honeymoon period of cooperation between the academics and the giant group for several years, the first thing the academics wanted to take back was Liaodong, which used to belong to them. At the end of May, 2 directors close to Bai Qingxian in Liaodong were replaced. One belonged to the North Group, and the other belonged to the academics. In mid-June, General Nan, one of Dongqing Wudi's most valued backbone generals and the commander of the Navy of Jianghu State, was transferred to Yuzhou. Under the full opposition of the Southeast Group and the Giant Group, General Nan's position was changed from the Deputy Minister of National Defense of Jianghu State to the Deputy Minister of the General Staff. He was promoted but secretly demoted. However, compared with the initial result, General Nan at least retained some real power. A series of purges were carried out within the Navy. The North Group expanded once again, and the academics and the Prince Group occupied the majority of the profits. At the end of June, the Southeast Group, which had gradually stabilized, was in turmoil again. Fan Tianyin, the Minister of Security, voluntarily resigned from his position, which seemed to be the compensation given to the giant group by the Southeast Group. At the beginning of July, after a short and intense game and operation, Fireman, who used to belong to the Li family's sacred guards and was known as the strongest fire-flaming realm expert, officially became the Minister of Security of Jianghu State. Everything seemed to have undergone some subtle changes during this period of time. Li Tianlan looked at it carefully. Military counselor handed him the information. There was a list below each matter, which was the final voting result of the parliament. The list appeared again and again. It could be seen that the plenary meeting of the Parliament of Jianghu State was held very diligently during this period. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at it carefully. His eyes flickered when he looked at the list. There was no change in the attitude of the 9 directors on the list. But as time went by and events were updated, the attitude of some of the members below gradually changed. Some of the members who originally belonged to the academics and the Prince Group seemed to have different voices. In order to confirm this, Li Tianlan glanced down again. In July, the Minister of the Riot Control Department encountered a lot of reports. Although this senior general, who had always been close to the giant group, was finally taken down, the voting result became more and more interesting. At the end of July, the commander of the Black Dragon Army of the Border Control Corps and Lieutenant General Thunder God of Jianghu State was included in the adjustment list by the military. At the council meeting, Dongqing Wudi seemed to be unable to bear it. He flew into a rage and directly smashed a glass in the conference room. He even almost fought with a member of the Prince group in the conference room. The adjustment was finally cancelled. The North group, which had been playing a vanguard role recently, was silent this time and completely abstained. And the voting result inside the academics and the Prince group changed again. At the end of August. Just a few days ago, the governor of Nanyue province was transferred to a deputy minister of a department in Yuzhou. He was also a backbone of a family in the giant group. The North group exerted its power again. Although it didn't get the position of president, it successfully won the position of a council member in Nanyue province. And the voting result became more and more obvious. In the voting result again and again, there were members of the academics and the Prince group who began to oppose the proposal of Li Huacheng and Chen Fangqing. This kind of opposition was very subtle. The people who opposed it were different every time, but there were people every time. It showed that the two groups had begun to be in turmoil. Was it because of the recent fierce game that affected the general trend of the country? Or was it because of other reasons? Li Tianlan glanced at military counselor and said in a deep voice, "What's the matter? What do you see?" Military counselor said with a smile. The North group has developed very fast in the past 6 months. Their strength has increased a lot, but some members of parliament have some problems with their attitudes. Li Tianlan said in a low voice. Indeed, it's for this reason that Hua Xingyang recently came to the desert prison to ask you to go out. They have gotten satisfactory benefits from the giant group. In order to calm some voices, they are now ready to let go of you, the main contradiction, and continue to target the Wang family of Beihai together. In other words, they decided to give you freedom. Military counselor said blandly, "But I don't think you need charity." Your Highness. Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, "Have you ever thought about controlling a group that can control the general trend of Jianghu state? For example?" Li Tianlan said blandly. "For example, the giant group." Military counselor said seriously. "The giant group? Hee, after I go out, will the giant group still have the ability to control the general trend?" "Of course, and it will be stronger than now." Military counselor said affirmatively. "On what basis?" Li Tianlan glanced at him. "Because I'm military counselor." Military counselor paused, suddenly raised his hand and took off his cloak. A thin middle-aged face that Li Tianlan was familiar with appeared in front of Li Tianlan with an easygoing smile. "Tianlan." He chuckled and took the initiative to reach out his hand. "Let me reintroduce myself. I'm military counselor. We haven't seen each other for a long time." Li Tianlan's body shook and his eyebrows suddenly raised. He stared at the middle-aged man in front of him and was silent for a long time before he took a deep breath. "It's you." Chapter 762. The room was silent. Li Tianlan looked at military counselor quietly. Military counselor slowly withdrew his outstretched hand and looked at Li Tianlan calmly. "It was you, but how could it be you?" Li Tianlan suddenly thought of a conversation he had with military counselor in Huading more than 3 years ago. At that time, military counselor had already told him that the headquarters of Samsara Palace was in Jianghu state. It was in a place that everyone could see but could not perceive. Such a headquarters had no specific address, but it was the core of a large force and a very stable bond. Military counselor directly controlled the headquarters of Samsara Palace. "You're surprised." Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan and smiled. He took off his cloak, and his attitude changed slightly. His temperament became calmer. "I once heard from Yuetong that there are a few people in Jianghu state who seem to be low-key, but in fact, even the Wang family of Beihai has to treat them with caution. There are not many such people, and you are one of them." Li Tianlan said slowly, "No, it should be said that you can even rank first." "You mean the threat list of the major groups?" Military counselor raised his eyebrows. "I know this thing. It's meaningless. I don't know the so-called threat list, but the Wang family of Beihai really attaches great importance to you." Li Tianlan said blandly. He had begun to think quickly about how much impact military counselor's true identity would have on the whole Jianghu state once it was exposed. Has the Wang family of Beihai already suspected your identity? No. Military counselor shook his head. I've never done anything, and there's nothing suspicious about me. I've cooperated with the Wang family of Beihai the most, so they are the most guarded against me. In terms of hard strength, I'm sure I can't compete with the Wang family of Beihai. In some aspects, Samsara Palace is very advantageous. But the short-term development of Samsara Palace can't surpass that of Beihai, which has been accumulating for hundreds of years. Wang Tianzong is afraid of me because he doesn't know what I want and my weakness. Other groups are afraid of me because of this. Military counselor handed Li Tianlan a cigarette. In the lingering smoke, his voice was a little erratic. Your Highness, do you know the threat list of the major groups? Tell me the details. Li Tianlan was expressionless. He was not in a good mood. It was not because of military counselor's change in attitude or his subtle loyalty. It was because of his instinctive reaction when he was facing a behemoth that nominally belonged to him but he could not control at all. This was different from when he learned that Saint was Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu. Mount Shu was very strong and its swords were scattered in the southwest. It could be said to outshine the others in the entire southwest special warfare field, but Li Tianlan still did not feel threatened. As for the military counselor, he controlled part of the core power of the Samsara Palace. To put it bluntly, not to mention the newly established Emperor Dong's palace, even the Wang family of Beihai at its peak, with Wang Tianzong in charge, if the military counselor went crazy regardless of the consequences, the entire Wang family of Beihai would be dragged into a quagmire that they could not extricate themselves from. If the military counselor was his enemy now, Emperor Dong's palace would not even have the right to breathe in the face of his suppression. That was because the military advisor had no weaknesses. He didn't have a so-called family. As long as he hid abroad with his family, he could ignore everything. At this point, even someone as strong as Wang Tianzong or the future Li Tianlan couldn't do it. The former had Beihai, while the latter had Tiannan in the future. This was their biggest fetter. The so-called threat list is a specific statistic of some people who have the strength and potential to cause great harm to Jianghu state. The biggest feature of this list is that the people in Jianghu state are not controlled by the six but do not belong to foreign forces. How many people like this can there be? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and shook his head. Not many. As far as I know, not only the Wang family of Beihai, but also my name ranks first in the threat list of the six. From this point of view, Your Highness, even if Emperor Dong's palace rises and you enter the peak of the invincible realm, you are still not as good as me. Military counselor said with a smile. So Yue Tong reminded me more than once that you are the most important person in the entire Jianghu state. Li Tianlan said quietly. That little girl, she studied in my place for a while. Of course, I didn't teach her myself. She is actually a very good administrator, but Wang Tianzong spoils her too much. Military counselor shook his head and looked at Li Tianlan with a faint smile. What else did she say? Was it after I bumped into you? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and said lightly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that what she said makes sense. It doesn't matter. Military counselor said softly, Your Highness, what matters is that we are on the same side now. Li Tianlan said indifferently, without any emotional fluctuations. He looked at military counselor's eyes quietly and said in a calm voice, Are you? Of course. Military counselor's voice was calm. At least now, Your Highness and I are on the same side. Then when will it not be? Li Tianlan said with a faint smile. Military counselor was silent for a while and said slowly, After I give you all the things the palace master left for Your Highness, I hope to retire. Li Tianlan's palm trembled slightly. He thought of the master of Samsara Palace who had fallen in Mormons and whose remains had not been found so far. He thought of the meeting between the two. He lowered his head and said indifferently, What else did she leave for me? A saber. Military counselor said, The sharpest saber. Li Tianlan glanced at him. Military counselor had said that he was the saber holder of Samsara Palace. Saber, he whispered to himself and laughed at himself. I thought you would say that she left me a group that could control the overall situation of Jianghu state. Not only a group. Military counselor corrected him seriously. Saber is the core of the entire Samsara Palace. You can even understand it this way. Samsara Palace is the name of an organization. Saber is also the name of an organization. But no matter what the name is, it is the power in the hands of the palace master and the power she asked me to give to your highness. If you look at it from another perspective, Samsara Palace actually didn't exist, and neither did Saber. Li Tianlan glanced at him. Speak human language. What is Saber? It's an organization. Military counselor said in a serious manner. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched and he clenched his fists. In his heart, thousands of grass mud horses were roaring and galloping, almost overturning the whole desert. He smiled stiffly and reminded her, you just said that they don't exist. It depends on which aspect you understand it from. Military counselor said slowly, it exists, but it also doesn't exist. Such an organization has no headquarters, no clear internal rules, and no rules that members of the organization need to abide by. There is very little information flow within the organization, and it never pays attention to anything. I'm the man with the saber, but I'm not the leader of Saber. Neither is the palace master. Such an organization has no headquarters and rules, and there is no so-called leader. From this point of view, Your Highness, you can understand this organization as a market. A market? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Yes, a market. There are even no so-called orders and obedience here. There are only two words in the organization that are the most important. Military counselor said seriously, interest demands and supply needs. So it's a market and also a platform. Li Tianlan stretched out his hand and motioned for him to continue. As of 3 months ago, I roughly estimated that there are more than 30,000 people in the organization, among which there are nearly 200 officials above the level of deputy governor. The industries in the organization have been designed to cover nearly 400 fields in Jianghu state, such as clothing, food, housing, transportation, energy, weapons, financial stocks, network media, survey, aerospace, and so on. Let's not talk about the political level. Just talking about these industries, if they are all gathered together, we can mobilize more than 200 trillion funds in an instant. Speaking of other aspects, we can spread our voice throughout Jianghu state in an instant. Your Highness, do you know what this means? Li Tianlan's heart suffered a huge shock. 200 trillion. Not 20 billion. Not 200 billion. Not 2 trillion. It was 200 trillion. It's impossible. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. This was even enough to overthrow all the orders. What's impossible? Military counselor was a little confused. Your Highness, did you say 200 trillion? You should pay attention to one thing. There's a precondition for the 200 trillion. That is, we have to integrate all our forces. In fact, this is simply impossible. We can only use a small part of it, a very, very small part. Mobilizing resources requires a precondition. Military counselor was a little helpless. Li Tianlan's heart moved. Is this the need you mentioned? Yes, someone has a need, so someone will provide resources, and finally, there will be cooperation. For example, if you want to make a movie, you need a series of preparations. In the early stage of operation, you will find different people and get through different relationships. Finally, you will form a small circle with the movie as the core. Everyone in this small circle has other connections behind them, and then a larger network of contacts is formed. Another example is that a member of parliament owes me a favor, and a mayor needs to seek a position at the level of deputy governor. I bring together people who have a need for benefits and those who can satisfy the need for benefits. If this matter is successful, then I will affect another small circle. I don't know if you can understand, but this is Saber, an obscure but almost omnipotent platform. Even many of the parties involved don't know that they are a member of Saber. What's the point? Li Tianlan shook his head. This is not an organization. It is almost equivalent to a miniature society. But when it comes to individuals, it is a behemoth that is too big to be controlled. You can't control it, and neither can I. You are too ambitious, military counselor said meaningfully. The military counselor said meaningfully, of course, it's impossible to control the complete Saber. However, countless circles radiate each other. In the beginning, there has to be a source, or rather, a core. Once we control the core circle, we can influence some of the forces on the periphery. By influencing and radiating each other, we can form a real general trend. Your Highness, I can't give you the complete Saber because it's not mine. However, I can give you the core part that I can influence. He took out a list and handed it to Li Tianlan. These are the core members of the organization, but they are not my subordinates. They are important allies in the organization. Saber will not lead others, so there is no so-called dominance. The original intention of establishing the organization is not to control anything. We don't need loyalty. What we need is to use all kinds of power to create a situation that can satisfy us. I call this model the ally model. We use each other to get what we need. He patted the list in his hand. They are all here. Chapter 763. Incredible and Indescribable. Li Tianlan couldn't understand all the meaning of the saber for the time being, but just a part of what he understood from the conversation was enough to make him feel emotional. Samsara Palace had no so-called foundation or headquarters. When it was first established, it built a real micro-society. Li Tianlan looked down at the list in his hand. The list was not long, but in a specific field, every name on it could be said to be famous. High officials, generals, wealthy families, scholars, stars, they had everything they needed. These were the core personnel that military counselors could influence in their respective fields. Influence. Not control. Ally mode. Li Tianlan thought about these 4 words seriously. For a moment, he felt that the more he thought about it, the more interesting it was. He looked at the list in his hand again. After a long time, he nodded and whispered, "The creativity of a genius." The creativity is not outstanding. The difficulty lies in the resources. Military counselor said calmly. You did a good job. Li Tianlan said slowly. His voice was very deep. This was not praise. It was admiration. If I were you, I couldn't do it. I believe that even Wang Tianzong can't do it. Because I am military counselor. Military counselor said in a deep voice, I know my position very well, and I know what I want. I also know that the saber doesn't belong to anyone. He paused, shook his head, and said with a self-deprecating smile, for so many years, I've been trembling with fear and treading on thin ice. Hey. I'm really tired. You've worked hard. Li Tianlan's eyes wandered on the list in front of him, thinking about the so-called saber. Military counselor said that the difficulty lay in the resources. But there was one thing he was missing. Or quality. That was absolute rationality, or rather, self-restraint. For Li Tianlan, this was a difficult problem. Or, he didn't like this so-called ally mode very much. A behemoth that could exert influence but was illusory and almost non-existent. Unlike groups and countries, there was no specific organizational structure. What could ensure the vitality of this kind of organization was never power, but restraint. Li Tianlan couldn't evaluate which was more advantageous between this mode and the group for a while. The members of the group were united, their standpoint was clear, and they had a clear sense of the overall situation. They knew when to advance and when to retreat. Everyone could find a clear direction in the group. However, the ally mode did not need these. At the very beginning, this mode was extremely naked and used each other. What you could give me, I could give you. Everything was clear. There was no so-called loyalty or standpoint here, only obligations. However, This loose mode could make a clear voice within the major groups and form a visible force. It would not arouse too much vigilance. This was undoubtedly the most suitable mode for the Samsara Palace. As for the military counselor, as the hand holding the saber, he had only been quietly developing over the past many years. He had never tried to control any resources. Because of this, the area that the saber could influence was getting bigger and bigger. However, it could only be said to be an influence, not control. This kind of model did not allow for any ambition to forcefully control anything. Li Tianlan looked at the list in front of him. It could be said to be the core of the saber. The military counselor could not control them, but as an important ally of Blade, the fact that the military counselor had given him this list proved that he could exert great influence over the people on the list. Li Tianlan did not deny that these people could help him. But he did not like this kind of uncontrollable situation. He could not be as rational as the military counselor. Therefore, when he took over the organization, in the process of power centralization, the power would inevitably shrink, and to a considerable extent. I don't like it very much. Li Tianlan knocked on the list in front of him and said bluntly, there are too many uncertainties. I can understand. Military counselor nodded. But this is the best mode. How much of this organization can you control? Li Tianlan asked. I have never tried to control them. They are allies, not subordinates. Your Highness, in other words, this model is actually effective in all the major groups. Members of parliament within the group, and even the Li family, can be said to be important allies of the group. And the senior officials they promote are their core circle. This circle has countless resources and interests, so it eventually forms a larger and larger circle. First, it's allies, then it's the core circle of the allies, and finally, it's some fields that are radiated. When all of these add up, it's the group. And there are 6 such groups, that is to say, 6 circles, so today's Jianghu state is formed. Military counselor said helplessly. But this is not a group. Li Tianlan knocked on the list. This is Blade. It doesn't matter. Military counselor gave a wry smile. Every group is formed through countless entanglements of interests, and after a long time, the tacit understanding between generations. Saber has clearly defined the obligations of every ally. It looks a little naked, and the structure is very loose, but we've shortened the process of forming a group by many times. It looks nondescript, but when it comes to operation, the effect is the same. What if I ask you to control some resources in the organization as much as possible? How much can you control? Li Tianlan looked into military counselor's eyes and asked slowly. Military counselor took a serious look at him and kept silent for a long time. I've asked someone to make a general model. Well, I've asked a lot of people, including sociologists, psychologists, financial experts, and so on. It involves a lot of things, such as finance, interpersonal relationships, psychology, politics, law. I've been working on this model since you appeared, but it wasn't until recently that I received a rough version. If I break the structure of Blade now and start to centralize the power, it will take us about 5 to 10 years to complete the transformation with the full cooperation of the giant group. In the end, we can probably retain about 3 to 5% of the current strength of the organization. Even the most optimistic estimate is that the power we can directly control will not exceed 7%. Li Tianlan was speechless. He still couldn't quite understand the power of Blade, which needed specific operation to see the whole picture. Naturally, he couldn't understand what 7 out of 500% meant. He only knew that the degree of shrinkage was severe, directly shrinking dozens of times. Of course, even if it's only 5%, the specific power is roughly equivalent to more than 60% of the power of the North Group. Well, I mean the North Group 6 months ago. Military counselor said with a smile. Oh. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and thought of something. He said slowly, so you mean that the 5% you mentioned is equivalent to the power you can directly control now? It's influence. Military counselor's voice was very implicit. He pointed to the list and said, they are our allies. I respect them enough, and they respect me enough. Li Tianlan picked up the list again. Is this the 5%? He looked at the names on the list carefully, narrowed his eyes, and finally stopped at a name. Zhou Yu. Jianghu State Northern City Councilor, Deputy Speaker. He was Zhou Yunhai's nephew. To be exact, he was the future successor of the North Group. His significance in the North Group was equivalent to Wang Jingxin's significance in the Southeast Group and Zhou Yuanshan's significance in the Giant Group. And now, an important ally. Li Tianlan smiled and said frankly, 5% is not enough. 7% is not enough either. This is the limit of my ability. Military Counselor smiled and deliberately emphasized a certain word. Li Tianlan glanced at him. But this is not necessarily the limit of my ability. It's the limit of my ability. In terms of management, I'm not as good as you. Li Tianlan said casually. He had never been arrogant, but he would not belittle himself either. If it was just about martial arts talent, he did not think that anyone in Jianghu State or even the whole dark world was worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as him. But to run a big force, manage everything well, be a qualified leader, and even be a great strategist, he did not think he had this ability. He knew a lot of things, but he could not be the opponent of those old foxes who were immersed in it all year round. With his age and experience, it was even difficult for him to figure out the specific meaning of the saber, let alone control it. It's not just a matter of management. The saber has developed to this point. What you see in front of you is already the limit, Your Highness. Military Counselor said calmly, there are some things that I have, but Your Highness doesn't. Similarly, there are some things that Your Highness has, but I don't. For example? Li Tianlan rubbed the list in his hand. For example, the Giant Group. Military Counselor said meaningfully, this is also a resource, and it is a resource that Your Highness can completely control. The saber is an ally, and resources are more important than anything else. Your Highness can completely control the Giant Group, so you can naturally use these resources to give our allies greater support and even pave the way for them. In return, they can also give Your Highness greater feedback. You're wrong about one thing. The Giant Group is not a resource that I control. There are so many powerful families, and there are always some who don't like me. Li Tianlan smiled. There are indeed. Military Counselor said with a meaningful smile, but aren't they disappearing now? Li Tianlan was slightly stunned. Military Counselor's voice continued, reshuffling is the basis of the cooperation between the Giant Group and the Southeast Group. The Southeast Group temporarily adjusted its plan and lowered its position in Jianghu State for the next few decades to stabilize the overall situation and eliminate the influence that Wang Qinglei brought to the Southeast Group. The Giant Group also urgently needs reshuffling, or even transformation, and begins to centralize power from the previous loose structure. Simply put, the future of the Southeast Group is centered on Wang Xingxiao and Wang Jingxin, and all those who don't agree with this will be eliminated. The Giant Group is centered on you and Zhou Yuanshan, and those who don't agree will also be eliminated. This approach is tantamount to scraping the bones to cure the poison. Even if it succeeds, the vitality will be greatly damaged. Li Tianlan frowned and said slowly. The Wang family of Beihai has to do this. They are bound to compromise. In this case, it's better to take the opportunity to clean up some disobedient people. The strength of the group will shrink, but the cohesion will be stronger. Although the Giant Group is also shrinking, Military Counselor smiled and reached out to pat the list. But our allies are enough to help us get through the period of weakness. Li Tianlan thought of the North Group's countless vanguards in the past 6 months. He thought of Zhou Yu, the successor of the North Group. He thought of the shrinking Giant Group. All this was just because of the addition of a military counselor, or an ally mode. Everything became different. Tell me what you think. Li Tianlan looked at military counselor. I have no idea. It's not suitable for you to leave the desert prison now. Your appearance can only further intensify the contradictions within the Giant Group. It's not suitable for reshuffling. Military Counselor smiled and said, and our allies are still looking forward to your growth. You need stronger persuasion to make them firm in their positions. The desert prison is very good. It's very quiet here, enough for you to calm down and become stronger and stronger. Think about Wang Tianzong. He won't intervene in too many specific affairs in the Wang family of Beihai, but with him, the entire Beihai is very stable. Why? Because he is invincible in the world. When a person is truly invincible in the world, his deterrence is no longer limited to martial arts. Only in that case can you control more of the power inside the saber. As for the outside world, everything is still under control. I hope that when you leave here, you will see a real new world. Chapter 764. Li Tianlan took a deep look at military counselor and suddenly asked, "How long do you want me to stay here?" Military counselor paused and laughed. "To be precise, Your Highness, how long do you want to stay here?" Li Tianlan tapped the table with his fingers and didn't answer. Military counselor wanted him to stay here. Li Tianlan himself didn't want to leave now. Although their reasons were different, they didn't conflict with each other. Instead, they were logical. Li Tianlan wanted to stay here to become stronger. Military counselor hoped that he could take back what the master of Samsara Palace had asked him to temporarily take charge of after he became stronger. The core was to become stronger. Li Tianlan looked down at the list with sharp eyes, as if he were looking at a real saber. He confirmed his thoughts again. He didn't like the extremely loose alliance model of saber. It could even be said that he didn't approve of it. The so-called disapproval was not about the alliance model. It was about the looseness. He didn't like any organization with a loose structure, even if it was more hidden and could play a miraculous role sometimes. But if it was too loose, it meant too much uncontrollable risk. He clenched his fists subconsciously. What he could grasp must be the power that he could hold firmly in his hands. When can you really enter the invincible realm? Military counselor asked calmly. I know what you mean. Li Tianlan glanced at him. He didn't ask whether Saber's allies had the possibility of merging with the giant group in the future, nor did he ask about the specific position of those allies. The current situation was that the giant group was constantly losing blood, shrinking in size, and decreasing in strength. But because of the existence of these allies, the overall strength of the giant group didn't decline. In the recent personnel changes in Jianghu state, the voices of opposition appeared at the top of other groups, which was undoubtedly the influence of the allies. But military counselor didn't know what they would do in the future, and those allies themselves might not have a clear attitude and idea. Everyone was looking forward to Li Tianlan's achievements. Li Tianlan's growth was directly related to the final attitude of these allies. Pure force didn't seem to be of much use, but at least Li Tianlan didn't think it was useless. There were too many examples in history where individual bravery couldn't achieve anything. But in Li Tianlan's eyes, this didn't mean anything. It only meant that martial artists who couldn't achieve anything were still not strong enough. When a person had the power but was unable to destroy the entire world, his actions were reckless. He did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, and he was a boor. But when a person's power truly stood at the pinnacle and could sweep away everything, he was God. The chosen one had no schemes. One strike was enough. The distance between a boorish man and a god was the distance between sufficient strength and absolute strength. In the eyes of those allies, if Li Tianlan had reached the peak now, the Emperor Dong's palace, with the help of the chosen one, would expand without limit, occupy endless resources, and rule the dark world. The strength of an individual could make his absolute will unimpeded in the dark world, and his power would also be powerful on the world stage. Such a person and power were absolutely worthy of any ally's support. And if Li Tianlan stopped moving forward, his current combat capability was also at the top level in the dark world, but if it was limited to this, his allies would only gradually drift away from him. At least for now, Li Tianlan's personal advance and retreat meant too many things. Li Tianlan's combat capability had been growing, but he had never broken through to become a real invincible realm expert, which had made his allies hesitate. So the only thing Li Tianlan needed to do now was to improve his strength. It was meaningless for him to leave the desert prison, except for the chores. Military counselor and saint could handle the ordinary chores. Military counselor was stunned for a moment and then said softly, "At present, the situation outside is relatively deadlocked. Both the Southeast group and the Giant group are waiting for a big shuffle. Although we are cooperating, there are some things that we don't know." After summer solstice visited Li Huaqing's attitude changed subtly. "I guess the two sides have probably reached an agreement, so now both sides are fighting to control the shuffle. Moreover, the two groups will also trade some positions. Your Highness, to tell you the truth, you are not very good at this kind of thing, which is why I suggest you stay in the desert. If nothing unexpected happens, the new balance will probably be reached in more than a year. That is also the most suitable time for you to leave the desert." 1 year later. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, "Succession? Yes, at present, whether Li Huaqing can stay or not is very important." Li Tianlan thought for a moment and said softly, "If Li Huaqing retires, Wang Qinglei has the best chance." According to the usual practice, in the adjustment a few years ago, Wang Qinglei should have become a director. At that time, the palace master was very hostile to the Wang family of Beihai. We exerted some influence, but Wang Qinglei didn't go up. Now looking back, Wang Tianzong should have also noticed something at that time, so he secretly operated some things, causing Wang Qinglei to stay in Wuxia. In this way, even if Li Huaqing retires, although Wang Qinglei still has a chance, he is no longer popular. The new president is probably a transitional figure. For us, Li Huaqing staying in office is the most favorable situation. But what Li Huaqing wants is Beihai. Li Tianlan stood up and walked back and forth. "You mean, when summer solstice visited Li Huaqing, she offered to support him to be re-elected, so that he would give up his suppression of Beihai?" He shook his head. "If he takes Beihai, he will have great merits and be famous in history. It is unlikely that he will accept it." "Not everyone is as sharp as your Highness," military counselor said softly. "Taking Beihai is a big goal. It's the same as unifying the world. The goal is there, but not many people expect to achieve it in a short time. In fact, if you want to take back the dominance of Beihai, it has to be done little by little. Jianghu state doesn't allow Beihai to split, but Wang Xingxiao has given his bottom line. So this game is a real tug of war. There can't be any results in a few years. Maybe it will be a game of decades or even hundreds of years. In fact, they have gotten enough in the past year. I think they will stop temporarily when they reach a predetermined goal and make plans slowly. After all, for more than a year, Beihai's conscription has not stopped. Nearly 200,000 veterans of the Beihai Corps have rejoined the army. At the same time, the Beihai Corps has recruited nearly 400,000 new soldiers. Now the entire Beihai Corps has more people than the Border Control Corps. Once an army of nearly 800,000 gets out of control. Hey! So you think that when he reaches a certain goal, Li Huaqing will take the initiative to compromise and take the olive branch extended by summer solstice? Although this is cooperation, it is essentially a threat. Li Tianlan said seriously. It's not a compromise. Politics is not a war, let alone a bottomless struggle. It's an art. Tianlan, you must remember this. There is the most delicate balance in the world here. Wang Xingxiao intimidated Jianghu state with a tough stance that he would not hesitate to fight. The next step is to compromise, advance and retreat. Jianghu state is indeed stronger than Beihai, but it is impossible for Jianghu state to retreat step by step. In fact, after being strong, Jianghu state also has to selectively make concessions. The parliament made a strong move this time, and when it reaches a certain point, it is bound to stop. You can't think of it as bowing down. It can be said to be a change of strategy. A voice rang out at the door. Dongqing Wudi, who was wearing a marshal's military uniform, walked in and said meaningfully, "Those who can sit in high positions can't do everything without a purpose. Being strong or compromising is a way to achieve a goal. They made a strong move and encountered a problem after achieving their goal. Next, they must change their method and plot another goal. Minister. Li Tianlan nodded. So Li Huaqing will agree to summer solstice. The academics has not been in an ideal state in the past 10 years of adjustment. Once Li Huaqing retires, he is bound to be squeezed by other groups. It is very important for him to be re-elected. 5 years is enough for him to make arrangements for the academics again, so he will agree to at least some of summer solstice's conditions. He needs to use this time to win over some people to make up for the shortcomings in the political structure of the academics. Dongqing Wudi said quietly. Military counselor's eyes lit up, and a smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. Dongqing Wudi's statement coincided with his thoughts. Minister, you mean that thing is settled? Military counselor asked with a smile. Although he had great influence in Jianghu state, he was not a high-level official after all. So when they were alone, it was not appropriate to say something. Now that Li Tianlan was here, the meaning was different. Most likely. Dongqing Wudi hesitated for a moment and said slowly, the president and the prime minister asked me to communicate this issue. I don't understand. Li Tianlan said directly. It was a question, but it was also learning. He was really not good at the twists and turns in the so-called art. Military counselor asked about the candidate for the director of the Southeast Group after a year. Dongqing Wudi said softly. Settled? Li Tianlan thought of the competition between Yi Dongsheng and Wang Qinglei. It's hard to say at the moment, but the current situation. Yi Dongsheng and Wang Qinglei should become directors of Jianghu state at the same time. This is also the result that the Southeast Group can reluctantly accept. Yi Dongsheng. Wang Qinglei. There was no Wen Siyuan. No matter how slow Li Tianlan was, he knew what it meant. It meant that for the first time in hundreds of years, the speaker of Beihai did not enter the council. Is this summer solstice's compromise? The Southeast Group would rather give up Wen Siyuan and let Wang Qinglei go? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. It's not the Southeast Group that is unwilling to give up Wang Qinglei, military counselor smiled. It's the academics and the Prince Group that are unwilling to give up. Although Wang Qinglei is still the leader of the Southeast Group in name, in fact, he has completely fallen out with Xia Ji. Letting him go up is tantamount to occupying a place that belongs to the Southeast Group, but he will not contribute to the development of the Southeast Group, which will greatly weaken the influence of the Southeast Group. Although Wen Siyuan can't go up, he will stay. He is still young, so he may have a chance in the future. Moreover, he has a high prestige in Beihai. When the Southeast Group reshuffles, it really needs Wen Siyuan to stay in Beihai to stabilize the army's morale. Wang Qinglei is very ambitious about Li Huaqing's position. After losing the support of the Southeast Group, he is bound to seek new forces. The academics is the most suitable target. He comes from the Wang family of Beihai and has a good relationship with some retired but influential old comrades. The academics very much hopes to unite these forces through him and make up for their shortcomings. Li Tianlan finally understood. So this is the change of strategy. After Wang Xingxiao showed his determination, the academics and the Prince Group have already understood that it is impossible to forcibly oppress him, so they plan to disintegrate the Wang family of Beihai from within? Wang Qinglei is a very important chess piece. As long as they win him over, they can fully support Wang Qinglei and push him to the position of Li Huaqing 6 years later. At that time, they will plot for the position of patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. In this way, to a large extent, Jianghu state will take back the dominance of Beihai. That's about it. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Dongqing Wudi's mouth. But the details still need a lot of deals. The academics can't push Wang Qinglei without conditions, so the right way is to let him fight for the position of patriarch first. At least, he should have as much influence as summer solstice in the Wang family of Beihai. As a condition for supporting him, the speaker of Beihai province must be replaced by someone from the academics. It happens that Wen Siyuan should be facing retirement or becoming a director at that time, and this position will be vacant. In addition, the commander of the Beihai Corps will also be replaced. This may become a goal that we, including ourselves, will strive for at that time. We destroy groups but never target individuals. This is Li Huaqing's specialty and the key strategy that enabled the academics to get to where they are today. It is still effective to use it on Beihai province. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. For a moment, he couldn't even figure out how complicated the calculation was. He only felt that it was even more complicated than his swordsmanship. It's ridiculous, he took a deep breath and muttered to himself, this is a trap. It's impossible for Summer Solstice not to see it. How could she agree to this kind of thing? This method. He thought about it seriously and said slowly, it's just like fighting for a few years of breathing time. What's the point? Who knows what Wang Tianzong's state will be like a few years later? Military counselor said blandly, she's delaying and putting her hope on Wang Tianzong's recovery. As long as his injury recovers, everything will turn around. After his injury recovers, Wang Tianzong will be the heavenly son of the age. Is she so sure that Wang Tianzong's injury can recover? Li Tianlan didn't think so. She has no way. Dongqing Wudi said, she can't see the way forward for the time being, so she can only delay it. This is the price she must pay, or a compromise. Li Tianlan was silent. Wuxia province, half of Huading, a considerable part of the Southeast Group's power, and a director's quota. This price could be said to be extremely heavy. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of a very important question. If Li Huaqing stays to help us complete the shuffle with the Southeast Group, then after he stays, if he stays, there won't be too many problems in the shuffle of the giant group. At that time, I will focus my resources on you. Li Tianlan's eyes flashed. Then at that time, the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group, it has nothing to do with us. Dongqing Wudi said flatly. His expression was very quiet, but there was a kind of resolute coldness and decisiveness in his words. Our biggest demand to cooperate with the Southeast Group is to smoothly complete the shuffle, that's all. Dongqing Wudi said. Li Tianlan opened his mouth. At this moment, he vaguely seemed to understand what politics was. The parliament of Jianghu state seemed to take a step back and only delayed the time for a few years, but it lacked the tricky opponent of the giant group. After the shuffle of the giant group, the group with Li Tianlan as the core was bound to be strengthened and absorb new blood. At that time, the giant group was also likely to become a member of the Southeast Group. So after the shuffle, we'll turn around and deal with the Southeast Group? Li Tianlan's voice was a little complicated. He didn't have a good impression of the Southeast Group, but this kind of relationship, which was close cooperation one moment and fierce in the next, still made him feel a little uncomfortable. This kind of discomfort had nothing to do with the Southeast Group. It had something to do with politics. Dongqing Wudi said it was art. But such art really didn't allow any sensibility. This was an art that was rational to the point of cruelty. After the shuffle, we need a period of time to integrate and connect with the power of military counselor so as to restore our strength. Of course, all this depends on your state at that time. If everything goes well, Dongqing Wudi looked at Li Tianlan. At that time, I should also retire. You should not ask me about Zhongzhou state at that time. You should ask yourself, because at that time, you led the giant group to play in the parliament. How to deal with the Southeast Group was all up to you. At that time, I should also retire. Military counselor chuckled and said, Your Highness, at that time, it will be your stage. Chapter 765. Li Tianlan understood what Dongqing Wudi and military counselor meant. No one solved everything for Li Tianlan, including the master of Samsara Palace. All they did was try their best to create the most favorable environment for him. If everything went well, Li Tianlan's future fate, the fate of Emperor Dong's palace, the fate of the Wang family of Beihai, the fate of many people, enemies, and friends, all depended on how he chose. And the most important thing was the next year. 1 year. Military counselor hoped that he would officially enter the invincible realm. All the people who had expectations for him hoped that he would enter the invincible realm a year later. During the 2 years in the desert, he cultivated his mind and restrained his sharpness. Everyone was looking forward to the moment when he really soared into the sky. Because he was the heavenly son of the age, no one thought that such expectations were unreasonable. Even military counselor forgot that even after a year, Li Tianlan was only 24 years old. What people were looking forward to now was a 24-year-old invincible realm expert. If he could do this, he could even be said to be the youngest invincible realm expert in hundreds of years since the emergence of the invincible realm experts. That was a well-deserved miracle. Li Tianlan lowered his head and was silent for a long time before whispering to himself, 1 year. Dongxing Wudi and military counselor looked at him with concern. Dongxing Wudi moved the corner of his mouth, shook his head, and laughed. It's really difficult, Tianlan. There's no need to embarrass yourself. I've never heard of such a young invincible realm expert. You will enter the invincible realm sooner or later. It's not a big problem. He paused and continued, there's no need to worry about this year. In fact, if Li Huaqing can be re-elected, we still have 6 years. Before he retires, you can enter the invincible realm, which is in line with expectations. 6 years. This year, Li Tianlan was 23 years old. 6 years later, he was 29 years old. At the age of nearly 30, all aspects of his body had reached the real peak. There was no problem for him to enter the invincible realm. No matter how much people doubted Li Tianlan's potential, no one believed that Li Tianlan needed to enter the invincible realm until he was 30 years old because of his combat capability. An invincible realm expert who was nearly 30 years old still had the hope of entering the peak. This time was undoubtedly the most reasonable. Li Tianlan shook his head. It's not a difficult problem. Invincible realm. What is invincible realm? There were invincible realm experts and invincible realm experts in the dark world. This unclear but real division was enough to explain a lot of problems. The so-called combat capability of the invincible realm could already show that he was not weaker than ordinary invincible realm experts in terms of combat. But this word often represented an upper limit. He had never entered the upper limit of the invincible realm. In theory, if a person's talent was limited. In theory, reaching the combat capability of the invincible realm was his end. For some talented people, the invincible realm was just the beginning. The most important thing in the invincible realm was the domain. Li Tianlan's martial arts were mainly based on the sword, and the most important were the sword energy and sword intent. This kind of path was completely different from the domain, but the meaning was almost the same. This was because sword chi and sword intent could both form a domain. To some extent, the domain of the invincible realm represented perfection. For any invincible realm expert, the domain was the best weapon and the strongest defense. Now if Li Tianlan didn't have the dragon vein, his combat capability wouldn't be weak. But compared with the real invincible realm experts, his physical strength, resistance, and endurance in fierce battles were worse. Only his lethality was comparable to that of the invincible realm experts. In other words, the combat capability of the invincible realm didn't represent perfection. Li Tianlan's achievements today were largely due to the strong vitality of the dragon vein, which made up for his shortcomings to a certain extent. If there was an example, Jianghu, Saint, and Wang Xiaoyao were the best examples. They were all in the invincible realm now. In their current state, even in their heyday, they wouldn't be Li Tianlan's opponents. Because they had just entered the invincible realm and their realm was not stable, which meant that their mastery of their own domain was not perfect. But if they completely stabilized their realm, Jianghu's double thunder veins would be fully exerted, and this process might last for a long time. Many experts who had just entered the invincible realm were trapped at this step, such as those who were at the bottom of the holy list. But once people like Jianghu stabilized their realm, their combat capability would soar exponentially, and they could even rise to the level close to the peak of the invincible realm, or even directly enter the peak of the invincible realm. At that time, Li Tianlan naturally couldn't be Jianghu's opponent. Li Tianlan now had his own path. But for every invincible realm expert, the domain represented perfection. The domain of every invincible realm expert was their own path. The domain of an invincible realm expert was like a world they controlled themselves. Within the scope of the domain, their speed, strength, and defense were greatly improved. The process of perfecting their own domain was the process of the invincible realm expert's continuous breakthrough. The same was true of swordsmanship. When one exerted his domain and swordsmanship to the extreme, he was the so-called peak of the invincible realm expert. But this was the biggest problem for Li Tianlan. Because his current condition was too perfect. It was too perfect, so it formed a flaw. His strength, speed, willpower, and sword intent were all so outstanding that he couldn't find a way to mix them together to form his own for the time being. The possibility of swordsmanship or domain. This was also the key to his failure to break through. If he couldn't solve this problem, it would be difficult for him to touch the threshold of the invincible realm, and he would only be left further and further behind by his former defeated opponents. But at the same time, because all his conditions were too perfect, once he really combined them together, he didn't even need to stabilize his realm, and his combat capability could directly soar to an incredible level. Because ordinary invincible realm experts needed to perfect their domains after breaking through. Their domains were the most perfect relative to their state before breaking through. But after entering the invincible realm, they had flaws, and they needed to keep improving and exploring. And Li Tianlan, he didn't need to stabilize his realm. Because he was perfect now. Once he entered the invincible realm, his domain would be truly perfect. In other words, as long as he could successfully break through, he didn't need to do anything excessive, and he would be at the peak of the invincible realm. This kind of reversal of order in martial arts meant too many things. It could be said to be the potential to reach the peak in the future. But at least for now, it seemed to be a problem for Li Tianlan. To enter the invincible realm within a year. No, almost. It was completely impossible. He shook his head and suddenly asked, "How is Rushi now?" Dongxing Wudi's expression stiffened for a moment, then he shook his head and whispered, "She's still in a coma. I go to see her every once in a while. Rushi is now in Xianyuan City, Nailan Shuriying has been working in Tiannan, and Beihai has helped Xianyuan City build a biological laboratory. At present, Rushi is sleeping in the hibernation chamber, and the result is hard to say." Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and whispered, then, he hesitated a little, but finally asked, "What about Yuetong?" "No news." Military counselor touched his nose with a bitter smile. "There was no news of her after she left Mount Dibbing last year. No one knows where she is now. My people have been looking for her, but there is no clue yet. If she wants to hide herself, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to find her." Li Tianlan smiled, and his expression was a little complicated. He looked at military counselor, narrowed his eyes, and finally did not continue to speak. "Your Highness, what do you want to ask?" Military counselor took the initiative to speak. He asked Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuetong, and then? "Where's Little Bai?" Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at military counselor. "Why is she hiding from me?" Military counselor opened his mouth and was speechless for a moment. "Wow, I've been in a bad state these days. This chapter is a little short. Well, it's snowing today, and it's so heavy, I don't know why I said this. I just want to say something. Maybe I feel guilty because I didn't write enough?" Chapter 766. Military counselor did not answer Li Tianlan's question, nor could he. In fact, Li Tianlan had been in the desert for a year, but Qin Weibai had left Zhongzhou state. It was said that she had gone to Switzerland. This news had aroused all kinds of speculation in some small circles in Zhongzhou state. Both sides were not nameless pawns. Dongxing Wudi could come to the desert prison, Bai Qingxian could come, and so could military counselor. With Qin Weibai's power, if she wanted to go to the desert prison, there would be no difficulty. Xiao Mahai, who completely regarded Li Tianlan as his ancestor, naturally did not dare to disobey the mistress. Under such circumstances, Qin Weibai was far away from Zhongzhou state, which made people speculate about other possibilities. It was inconsistent with his deep feelings. Many people felt that this matter was a little interesting. Li Tianlan glanced at him and did not continue to ask. He said casually, "Have you eaten? Eat something together?" Yesterday, a new batch of seafood arrived here. The chef's skills are passable. I know you can't stand being wronged here, eating delicacies every day. Dongxing Wudi said with a smile and shook his head slightly. The annual maintenance fee allocated by Zhongzhou State to the desert prison was just over 20 million yuan, which was a veritable public fund. Xiao Mahai took nearly a quarter of this money and used it as Li Tianlan's food expenses. Since Li Tianlan entered the desert prison, Xiao Mahai had hired more than 10 chefs who were proficient in different cuisines. Countless expensive ingredients, tobacco and alcohol were basically transported by air. A fighter jet near the prison was now responsible for this work. Xiao Mahai informed the nearest military region of the ingredients he needed, and then sent a fighter jet to the military region to fetch them. He was blatant and undisguised. The army headquarters and even the parliament had discussed the issue of Xiao Mahai's misuse of funds. More than one councillor even proposed to take Xiao Mahai down and let him go to Zhongzhou State for a talk. Xiao Mahai didn't care at all. He was clinging to Li Tianlan. The result of this was obvious. Xiao Mahai really didn't move. No matter how many attacks he suffered, no one could shake his position. "Let's go for a drink." Li Tianlan smiled. Dongxing Wudi hesitated, sighed slightly, shook his head, and said, "Forget it. I have to go to the Beijiang military region. There is a meeting in the army headquarters in the evening. Time is tight. Maybe next time." Li Tianlan was slightly startled. He nodded and said, "All right. Then I'll go back too." The military counselor stood up. The three of them walked out of the prison gate. "Do you have any clues about the North Sea attackers?" Li Tianlan asked suddenly. Li Tianlan was naturally curious about the mysterious chosen one who really stood at the end of martial arts. "No." Dongxing Wudi shook his head. "It's like he disappeared completely. All the signs show that this person doesn't exist." He suddenly smiled and said, "This has almost become an unsolved mystery. It's also because of him that the dark world has been quiet during this period of time. Not to mention waves, not even a wave. Everyone is afraid to be the first bird to stand out and be killed by him. But since that day, there has been no news from him." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He did have some doubts about that mysterious genius, but at the same time, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Every time he watched that video, he felt a sense of familiarity. Li Tianlan shook his head. In silence, the gate of the desert prison slowly opened, and the three of them were already surrounded by yellow sand. "Minister, take care." Li Tianlan stretched out his hand, his expression calm and serious. Dongxing Wudi took a deep look at him, shook hands with him, and turned to board the plane. The rotors of the helicopter whistled, driving the sand all over the sky, and flew higher and higher. Li Tianlan raised his head and watched quietly. The flying sand was bounced away by his sword energy and fell on the original terrain. It became a khaki tornado. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, quiet like a glimmer of light under the scorching sun in the desert. Xiao Mahai came over and asked cautiously, "Your Highness, what do you want for lunch?" "Serve the third dish." Li Tianlan turned around and walked into the prison. Xiao Mahai nodded. Li Tianlan had a special menu in the prison, which was divided into 6 types, from 1 to 6. There were 6 fixed dishes on each menu, and the other 2 could be matched at will. Menu number 3 was the dish of tianfu, with plenty of chili. Li Tianlan usually ate most of the dishes in menu number 3. The two walked back to the prison. Along the fine cracks all over the prison, he looked at the gate of the maze that really belonged to the scope. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and walked over. The prison guard had already opened the door with a respectful face. "You don't have to follow me." Li Tianlan said, "Go prepare the food and open a bottle of wine." Xiao Mahai nodded and wrote it down. He said softly, Mao Tai or Wuliangye? Or red wine? Give me some of both. Li Tianlan said. Xiao Mahai nodded and turned to the kitchen. The narrow corridor of the prison was lit with faint lights that could confuse people's perception. Li Tianlan walked silently in the maze until he reached the enemy near the core area. What appeared in front of him was a narrow door. It was quiet inside the door. Li Tianlan waved his hand to call a prison guard and said lightly, "Open the door." This was not in line with the rules, but the prison guard did not talk nonsense. After entering the complicated password, he opened the prison door. With a slight sound, a simple room appeared in front of Li Tianlan. It was an ordinary single bed with a thick mattress that looked very comfortable. An old cup was casually thrown on the bed. There was a desk and a chair in the space of about 10 square meters. There was a lamp on the desk. The toilet was in the corner, and there were some books on a small cabinet facing the toilet. A white-haired old man, who looked to be in his 60s or 70s and wearing presbyopic glasses, was sitting at the desk and reading with the help of the faint light from the small window. Hearing the sound, he turned his head and looked at Li Tianlan with some doubts. New cellmate? The old man stood up and frowned. There should be single rooms here. He suddenly narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, "So, I'm going to be executed. Make room for the newcomer?" Prisoners are rarely executed in the desert prison. It can be said that there is no death penalty here. Li Tianlan said lightly. It's not that there is no death penalty, but that there is no need. The old man looked at Li Tianlan for a while and laughed. Everyone who stays here is living a life worse than death. You look like you're quite relaxed. Li Tianlan said as he looked at the surroundings. What else can I do? The old man said quietly. He looked at the prison door that was still open, and then looked at Li Tianlan, seeming to find that Li Tianlan was dressed completely differently from the prisoners. You are? The old man was a little confused. Prison guard? Not quite. Prison management? It was even more unlikely. He was too young. Was he here to accompany the big shots of the army headquarters to inspect the work? But why did he come to contact him alone? From the standpoint of the prison, I can be regarded as your cellmate. Li Tianlan said, but I live outside. Outside? The old man's eyes flickered and he tentatively said, what if I stand in another standpoint? Li Tianlan turned around and said calmly, from another standpoint, I am your god. The old man suddenly raised his eyebrows. His eyes instantly became incomparably sharp. God? He asked. It was not a rhetorical question, but a question. Who do you think you are, Your Highness? Xiao Mahai's voice appeared at the door, interrupting the old man's sneer. I just received a notice from the parliament. Deputy Prime Minister Wuxia Xianxia, a member of the parliament, will come to the desert prison in a few days. He hopes to talk to you face to face. Li Tianlan said, arrange a time. Okay. Xiao Mahai nodded, looked at the old man in surprise, and turned to leave. The old man's figure stiffened for a moment. He looked at the direction of Xiao Mahai's departure and thought about the conversation between them just now. Jianghu State Member? Deputy Prime Minister Wuxia Xianxia? Even if he didn't know who the current members of Jianghu State were, at least he knew Xiao Mahai, the warden. He raised his head stiffly and looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was also looking at him, expressionless. Okay, God. The old man smiled bitterly. What do you want me to do? I want to learn. Li Tianlan walked out of the prison and waved his hand. Let's have dinner together. The old man followed Li Tianlan quietly. What do you want to learn? How to be a successful leader? Li Tianlan asked. The old man froze and looked up at Li Tianlan. Success. Success, he said it silently for a while and then laughed at himself. Do you know what you're asking? Are you asking a loser for advice on the experience of success? Just because you've failed, when you're closest to success. Li Tianlan said meaningfully, so I'm sure you can teach me a lot. The old man followed Li Tianlan with a blank face, and his eyes were in a trance. Li Tianlan stopped talking. He just quietly observed the old man, keeping his composure. Zhou Tong. This was a name that many people in Jianghu state had forgotten. This name might appear in history books as a negative teaching material for many years to come. But over the years, this name had completely disappeared in Jianghu state. But if time went back, more than a decade ago, this was one of the most powerful names in Jianghu state. He was a former member of parliament of Jianghu state and the speaker of Tianfu province. If one were to be exact. In those days, he was the main competitor of Li Huacheng, the current president of Jianghu state. What they fought for was not the position of president, but the position of crown prince. At that time, the academics was not as big as it was now, and Li Huacheng had almost no chance of winning. Everyone thought that Zhou Tong would reach the top. But just a month before the dust settled, when Zhou Tong's voice completely overwhelmed Li Huacheng's, when Zhou Tong was the closest to success, he came to the desert prison. That was the largest conflict between the academics and the prince group. At that time, Zhou Tong was one of the most important leaders of the prince group. If he hadn't competed so fiercely with Li Huacheng and had taken a step back, the prime minister of Jianghu state would basically have nothing to do with Qin Fangqin today. Even today, some of Zhou Tong's old subordinates and confidants promoted by him were still active in the prince group. And his son was now the deputy speaker of the Southwest Affairs, enjoying the treatment of the governor. Although he was not as dazzling as Zhou Yuanshan because of Zhou Tong, he was almost recognized as the successor of the big group within the prince group. Military counselor had already taken action in the outside world. So during this year in the desert prison, Li Tianlan naturally would not be idle. Chapter 767. Switzerland, Forgotten City. In the luxurious and exquisite office, a person in charge of the Lin clan's branch, who could summon wind and rain in the outside world, carefully retreated from the office with a respectful smile. Horsewoman stood at the door, looking at him silently and expressionlessly. The man, who looked over 50 years old, shook hands with Horsewoman with a warm smile, exchanged feelings, and then left contentedly. It was 9:00 in the evening in Switzerland. It was quiet in Forgotten City. Horsewoman looked at her watch, took out her mobile phone, and checked the schedule. After confirming that the boss would not receive other guests today and that there was nothing else to deal with, she turned and walked into the office. Qin Weibai, dressed in a moon-white cheongsam, was sitting behind the desk, dealing with documents. She still had an exquisite and perfect face, but at this moment, her whole aura seemed to be changing silently. It was not a kind of maturity after experiencing wind and rain, but a kind of change from calmness to sharpness. She quietly flipped through the documents in her hand, with a calm and serious face. Her every move was with indescribable rationality and magnanimity. This picture was beautiful. But this aura was so strong that Horsewoman subconsciously ignored her appearance and gender. Every time this happened, Horsewoman would think of the master of Samsara Palace. Facing the current Qin Weibai was more and more similar to facing the former master of Samsara Palace. For half a year, Qin Weibai sat in the position of the patriarch of the Lin clan. Horsewoman witnessed with her own eyes that she was becoming more and more powerful. She did not have world-shaking force, but she had established enough prestige in the branch system of the Lin clan in the shortest time. This half a year was busy and fulfilling. Qin Weibai completely squeezed into the core of the Lin clan bit by bit and became a veritable patriarch of the Lin clan. A month ago, Lin Fengting, who had stayed in Forgotten City for nearly half a year, took his luggage and went on a trip, which was enough to show that he was completely relieved about the situation of the Lin clan. South America has been very lively recently. Hearing the footsteps, Qin Weibai looked up at Horsewoman and said softly. Horsewoman was stunned and thought of the head of the branch who had just left. Lin Buzheng. According to the genealogical records of the Lin clan, this branch had left the headquarters for nearly 200 years and had been developing in South America. Lin Buzheng was already the 6th generation in charge of this branch. The Lin clan of South America was not considered the top wealthy family in the entire South American circle, but it had been firmly in the front line for many years. It was relatively influential in the top circle and involved in more complicated fields. Some information flashed through Horsewoman's mind. She looked at Qin Weibai and asked, "South America?" Qin Weibai nodded and took a sip of water from the cup. Horsewoman was a little confused. Lin Bujing didn't need to ask the headquarters for help in South America, did he? Even if Lin Bujing was not the top figure in South America, he was at least close to the top of the pyramid. If it was something in South America, what on earth had he encountered that made him rush back to the headquarters to find Qin Weibai? There are some remaining questions about the Heroes Club. Qin Weibai stood up and stretched gently. Her graceful body suddenly showed a thrilling curve. She wore a cotton dress and moved her body in the office. She frowned and said, "Since the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe, there has been no new invincible realm expert in the Heroes Club. They have no leader, and their internal affairs have never been peaceful. This is a behemoth that dominates South America and North America. Its internal turmoil has also affected many fields in South America. The Lin family of South America has also been greatly affected." Horsewoman's eyes flickered and she did not speak for a while. This was the case. The problem was often encountered in the Lin clan. Or it could be said that it had often appeared in the past 6 months. As the patriarch of the Lin clan, there were not many things that needed to be busy under normal circumstances. But the key was that the Samsara Palace had forcibly turned the normal state of the dark world into an abnormal state. In the chaos in Eastern Europe, more than half of the invincible realm experts on the divine and holy lists had fallen. Almost all the superpowers, including the Heroes Club, the Jianghu family of South America, the Men in Black, the Fantasy World, the Shadow Throne, most of the superpowers were leaderless. The whole dark world seemed calm, but the internal fighting had become more and more intense. Not only the Lin clan of South America, but almost all the branches of the Lin clan scattered all over the world were affected. Qin Weibai also took advantage of this matter to mediate and quickly established her prestige. In Horsewoman's impression, the Lin clan of South America seemed to have a problem a few months ago and was quickly solved. The Heroes Club. Is someone trying to integrate the forces of the Heroes Club? Is it the South American government or private? Horsewoman asked softly. It's the Jianghu family of South America. Qin Weibai said. Horsewoman suddenly narrowed her eyes. Annexation? How can it be so easy? Qin Weibai shook her head. This is the most complicated part. What do you need me to do? Horsewoman asked directly. The Heroes Club belonged to South America and had a deep cooperative relationship with many South American governments. When they were leaderless, the South American government wanted to take the Heroes Club for its own use. Although this matter was sensitive, it was not unnegotiable. The worst result was to break up and negotiate, but they would not fight. But the Jianghu family of South America was also a giant in South America. Once they annexed the Heroes Club, the two forces would unite. The Jianghu family of South America would have the power to seriously threaten any country in South America, and no country would be willing to tolerate it. Once this kind of thing started, it was almost equal to a war. With the right opportunity, other forces would naturally not stand idly by. The whole South America would be in a mess. No wonder Lin Bujing hurried back to the headquarters again. Go to South America. Qin Weibai said softly, meet Jiang Guochu in my name and talk to him. See his attitude first. If I'm not wrong, Jiang Guochu should have entered the invincible realm now. Horsewoman nodded, not surprised at all. In fact, before Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu appeared, Jiang Guochu had always been the youngest invincible realm expert in the dark world. He had been stuck at this threshold for several years. Now that he was in his early 30s, it was almost natural for him to enter the invincible realm. I'll go now, Horsewoman said softly. She paused, her eyes flashed, and she said softly, if there is a chance, let's see his attitude first and then report to me. I hope he will remember one thing. Today, the #1 expert in the dark world is still in the Lin clan. Horsewoman nodded, turned around, and left directly. Qin Weibai sat back at her desk and turned on the computer. There was a video file on the desktop that she had watched countless times. She moved the mouse and clicked on the video. In the picture, the Rolls-Royce was slowly approaching Mount Dibbing. The flawless young man got out of the car and looked at the calm Mount Dibbing with a cold expression. Qin Weibai stared blankly at the young man in the video and subconsciously touched her face. Her eyes were a little dazed, and she whispered, "So is this a coincidence or an accident?" The phone suddenly rang. Qin Weibai was slightly shocked. She took out the mobile phone beside her and looked at the number. After hesitating for a while, she pressed the answer button. "What's the matter?" she asked directly in a light voice. "I went to the desert prison with Dongqing Wudi today, and now I just returned to Yuzhou." Military counselor's calm voice sounded on the phone. Qin Weibai's bright eyes flickered slightly, and she whispered, "How is he?" "Very good, but also very bad." Military counselor said. "Be more specific." Qin Weibai frowned. Military counselor hesitated. He subconsciously wanted to tell Qin Weibai about Li Tianlan's choice in martial arts. But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he realized that Li Tianlan was not the person he had imagined. He could not understand anything about martial arts at all. He thought about how to phrase his words. After a moment of silence, he said helplessly, "You should go and see for yourself." Qin Weibai held the mobile phone in silence, and the expression on her dreamy perfect face was a little complicated. "He asked me today why you were hiding from him." Military counselor smiled bitterly. "I have nothing to say." Qin Weibai still did not speak, and she looked a little stubborn. Military counselor waited quietly for a long time before he said lightly, "Why? You obviously want to see him. What's the point of hiding in Switzerland? Who told you that I want to see him?" Qin Weibai's tone was cold. "You said it. You said that you are the same, and it's really the same. Since you are the same, then if you are the palace master, you must want to see him now." Military counselor said calmly. Qin Weibai paused and continued to be silent. "What are you insisting on?" Military counselor chuckled. "Or, what are you hesitating about?" "I don't know." Qin Weibai was silent for a long time before she said softly. Her voice was a little hoarse. "You don't know if you love him?" Military counselor's tone was light without any taste. "I said that we are the same. I can't describe that kind of the same as you. To be exact, this kind of essence is exactly the same. I can even let her affect my thoughts. This is not hypnosis, but a natural reaction when facing myself. I don't know if I love him or not, or I love him, but I don't know if this is the result of her influence." Qin Weibai said calmly. "Excuses." Military counselor's tone was understated. "You?" Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows. "He can affect you, and you can naturally affect him. You have been together for so long. When has the palace master ever changed her mind? The palace master hasn't changed, and you naturally won't change. So you are lying." Military counselor said slowly, "What on earth don't you know?" Qin Weibai took a deep breath and said softly, "He said he wanted to see me?" Military counselor was stunned and shook his head. "No, he just asked you why you were hiding from him." "He asked me why I was hiding from him," Qin Weibai laughed, and her voice was a little sad. "Are you sure that the me he said is really me?" Military counselor suddenly fell silent. Qin Weibai silently hung up the phone and reached out to gently cover her chest. Her heartbeat was rising and falling slowly, unusually stable. And an incomparably strong heartbeat was beating in sync with her heartbeat. But in addition, there was a third heartbeat beating slowly, extremely weak, but extremely real. Qin Weibai clenched her fists. Her face was pale, and her eyes suddenly became a little scared. Chapter 768. The night wind blew across Beihai. the lights on Mount Dibing gradually dimmed. In the quiet world, Wang Xingxiao sat on the stage of Formidable Person, looking at the calm Beihai and subconsciously tightened his coat. It was October. When the weather in the south was just about to cool down, Beihai had gradually become cold. There was a pot of wine beside him, and the wine had already been emptied. His face was rosy, and his somewhat hazy and drunk eyes silently looked at the moonlight reflected on the surface of the sea. He was in a daze, and no one knew what he was thinking. He had been the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai for more than half a year. After that world-shocking battle, Wang Xingxiao once again kept a low profile. He became more and more silent. He restrained all his sharpness, and the loftiness in the past seemed to have disappeared. He became more and more calm. Only the never-ending conscription in Beihai province could let people feel the power of the new patriarch of Beihai. The game with Zhongzhou state was still going on. But the compromise was done step by step. Following the North Sea Legion's compromise, a series of large-scale drills were held within the North Sea Legion. The hundreds of thousands of newly enlisted soldiers were undergoing special training every day before being thrown onto the drill field. After victory or defeat, they would undergo even more rigorous training. Beihai province seemed to be completely silent. But behind this silence, the atmosphere of the whole Beihai province became more and more iron-blooded. No one questioned Wang Xingxiao. That time, the whole Beihai saw Wang Xingxiao's attitude. Countless civilians of the North Sea province expressed sufficient support for the new patriarch. With the support of the people, the situation in Beihai gradually stabilized after many compromises. Although all of this was only temporary stability, for the North Sea province, it was an extremely rare opportunity to catch their breath. Wang Xingxiao's chin grew a short beard, and he looked more and more mature. The smile that once made people feel comfortable was less and less. His temperament gradually changed, becoming a little gloomy and more powerful. The orders from Mount Dibing had become less and less. Most of the time, Wang Xingxiao sat on the stage of Formidable Person. He ate, practiced, and meditated. The stage of Formidable Person seemed to have become his private residence. For half a year, he confined himself in the small space of the stage of Formidable Person. He spent every day with the stone of Formidable Person and almost never left the stage of Formidable Person. This meant that he had never left Mount Dibing. As a result, he missed out on many important things. The phone vibrated slightly, and the screen lit up. After drinking the last sip of wine, Wang Xingxiao felt refreshed. He took the phone and connected the video call. In the video, there was a room filled with warm light. In the warm yellow light, Song Ci, who was wearing plain pajamas, had long hair. Her slightly plump face was filled with gentleness. "Have you eaten?" Looking at the dark stage of Formidable Person on the screen, Song Ci asked softly. "Not yet. Jing Xian is in Mount Dibing. I've made an appointment with him to eat together." Wang Xingxiao laughed. The slight wrinkles between his eyebrows subconsciously relaxed, and his whole body relaxed. "It's so late. Why haven't you gone to bed?" "Your son woke up. It took me a long time to coax him to sleep, but I'm not sleepy anymore." Song Ci held the phone and moved the camera. A newborn baby appeared on the screen. He had a small body and a small face. His mouth was covered and he was sleeping soundly. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were calm, but there was a touch of doting and guilt deep in his eyes. This was his and Song Ci's child. A few months ago, when the child was born, he didn't leave Mount Dibing, so he didn't see the birth with his own eyes. Since the child was born, he hadn't even seen his father in the video. Wang Xingxiao's mouth moved, and he didn't know what to say for a while. The camera turned. Song Ci glanced at Wang Xingxiao and said with a faint smile, "What? Are you afraid that Haotian will blame you for being a bad father?" Their child was named Wang Haotian, and his nickname was Tutu. It was the name that Wang Xingxiao and Song Ci decided before the child was born. Wang Xingxiao sighed softly, feeling a little lost. "Don't worry. When he's older, I'll tell him that he has the best father who loves him the most." Song Ci said softly. It won't take that long. Wang Xingxiao smiled and said softly, when the situation stabilizes, I'll take you home. Okay. Song Ci nodded. She stared at Wang Xingxiao's face quietly and became silent. What's wrong? Wang Xingxiao touched his face. Nothing. Song Ci shook her head and said softly, I just miss you. Wang Xingxiao stopped talking and looked at the screen quietly. There were thousands of words to say, but it seemed that everything was in silence. In the slight sound of footsteps, Wang Jingxin came over with a food box. Seeing this scene, he paused and said with a smile, I'll come back later. No need. Wang Xingxiao smiled and hung up the video. He glanced at Wang Jingxin and asked, How's your wife and child? Very good. She asked me to thank you. She's very comfortable living here during this time. Wang Jingxin smiled. Her child was already in primary school. His wife was originally a middle-level cadre of the Lin and trade union, which was purely an idle job. Half a year ago, the situation in Jianghu suddenly changed. After Wang Jingxin was transferred to Jianghu as the governor, he placed his wife and child in Mount Dibing. In terms of the political climate in Jianghu, Mount Dibing was undoubtedly the best. We're a family. Don't be so polite. Wang Xingxiao shook his head, thought for a while, and said softly, How's the situation in Jianghu? Very good. Wang Jingxin opened the food box, took out some side dishes, and took out a pot of wine. Don't worry, there won't be any problems. Wang Xingxiao nodded, picked up the wine glass and took a sip. He had no doubt about Wang Jingxin's ability. In fact, Wang Jingxin's situation when he first arrived in Jianghu was not good. In half a year, he had completely established his foothold, and his performance had also been unanimously recognized by some big shots of the Southeast group. In the case that Wang Qinglei was already out of control, facing his wild ambition, the Southeast group could only put more hope on Wang Jingxin, and his performance made everyone very satisfied. How's Haotian? The little guys are very cute. When are you going to let them come back? Wang Jingxin asked with a smile. Now is not the time. We'll see the specific situation in a year. Wang Xingxiao frowned. Chairman Wang Jingxin hesitated for a brief moment. He wanted to speak but stopped himself. In fact, the reason why he came back this time was mainly to ask about Wen Siyuan's advancement and retreat a year later. This was undoubtedly the most crucial adjustment. Wen Siyuan could take a step forward, stay at the same spot, or retreat. Furthermore, there were 3 outcomes, and any one of them could turn into a good or bad news. Wang Jingxin wanted a clear outcome, and this also concerned whether his methods in Jianghu were firm or gentle. It's hard to say. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. Whether Li Huaqing stayed or not and Wen Siyuan's advancement and retreat could be said to be the most concerned issues in the next session. Many things had already begun to operate, and Wang Xingxiao could grasp the process and steps in detail. But for now, the result was still not clear enough, and could even be said to be confusing. Let's see if we can stop Wang Qinglei. Wang Xingxiao said softly, if we can stop him, everything will be fine. If we can't, the specific results may only be known at the end. Jianghu is not a big problem. Wang Jingxin said calmly. Jianghu was a province deeply affected by Wuxia. Wang Jingxin could control the situation in Jianghu and could play a great role, but he could not play a decisive role. Just do your best. Wang Qinglei said softly. He calculated the time and suddenly smiled. Don't worry, it's okay. At least there shouldn't be the worst result. Wang Jingxin silently took a sip of wine and did not speak. The so-called worst result was naturally the change of the chairman of Beihai province. If that day really came, it meant that the entire Southeast group and the Wang family of Beihai would face a critical moment of life and death. Wang Xingxiao said that such a result would not happen. Where did his confidence come from? Wang Xingxiao did not explain anything. He just held the wine glass and quietly looked at the calm Beihai in front of him. His eyes fell on a certain point on the sea level, and he was silent for a long time. Chapter 769. Wang Jingxin was not relieved. In the dim light of the sea, he looked at the calm Wang Xingxiao and felt more and more uneasy. "Do we still have trump cards?" he asked softly. After a pause, he continued, "I'm not talking about those troops." "Yes." Wang Xingxiao laughed softly. "Where are they?" Wang Jingxin stared at his profile and said in a low voice. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a while and said slowly, "Tiannan." Wang Jingxin took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "Tiannan." The current situation in Tiannan was very calm. At least on the surface, it was calm. The Freedom Corps guarded Ningbian, strictly trained, and served as the new gateway to the southern border of Jianghu state. After the chaos in Eastern Europe, the large amount of benefits Li Tianlan had gained in the 5 Eastern European countries had now turned into money. More than 30 wealthy families in Eastern Europe now had close cooperation with Li Tianlan, based in the 5 Eastern European countries. Even some of the wealthy families in Snow Country had boarded Li Tianlan's ship. Various fields in the 5 Eastern European countries had been monopolized by these wealthy families, and part of the business of Jianghu state had also started cooperation with these wealthy families. There was no doubt that whether they wanted to get involved in the 5 Eastern European countries or cooperate with Jianghu state, they needed Li Tianlan's approval. Because of this, Li Tianlan had obtained a large number of industrial shares of dozens of wealthy families. After a year, these shares had turned into almost astronomical dividends, and a large number of dividends were invested in the construction of Xianyuan City. In addition, a large number of funds and venture capital inside Jianghu state had poured into Xianyuan City. This small city, which used to be called Tunan, was shabby and desolate. It was even worse than some of the more developed towns in Jianghu state. With this city as the foundation, Xianyuan City was building a brand new city from beginning to end. The huge amount of work, the long urban planning, and the various industrial resources in the city were enough to make people jealous. The first investment of Huading Flourishing Age Fund had reached more than 30 billion, and this was only the first phase of investment. All the big families of the giant group were also contributing their strength. The graduates of the 2 academies recruited by Emperor Dong's palace also began to play their roles. Their combat effectiveness was improving. Among these people, some of the families they belonged to also began to migrate to Tiannan. Some refugees from several small countries near Tiannan and even some veterans from the Golden Triangle also began to settle down in Xianyuan City. Sufficient funds and a gradually increasing population would eventually become a huge productivity. Ning Qianqing also began to become more and more mature. In just 1 year, the size of Xianyuan City had doubled. All of this meant that Xianyuan City had completely entered the normal stage. Moreover, everyone knew very well that this wasn't the fastest speed in Xianyuan City. While many people were paying attention to the desert, when Li Tianlan officially got out of prison and returned to Tiannan, all kinds of investments would probably usher in a new round of explosive growth. Once such a result appeared, at least the Flourishing Age Fund, which had never been short of money and could even treat money as waste paper, would definitely invest an amount beyond everyone's imagination in Xianyuan City. The rapid development of Xianyuan City was also the reason why the Tiannan city was calm on the surface. Calm on the surface, but it also meant that undercurrents were surging in the dark. To the south of Xianyuan City, there was already a new heaven capital. Li Guangtu hadn't recovered from his injury, and he didn't make a clear statement either. At present, he was already in a state where he was neither close to Jianghu State nor East Island. East Island's patience was gradually running out, while the purgatory of Heaven Capital began to slowly move to Tiannan, and the new Heaven Capital was gradually becoming stable. At the lower right of Heaven Capital was Freedom City, where all the superpowers gathered. At present, because there was no absolute ruler, this was also the most chaotic place in Tiannan. That was because this was the most chaotic place in the Tiannan region. However, even though it was the most chaotic place, the major forces still maintained a certain degree of restraint. Compared to normal times, the situation could still be considered to be stable. Further south, near the border of Annan, Burning City and Raging Fire City were also under construction. The Burning Legion constantly sent soldiers here, and they almost moved their family from Africa to here. They also received strong support from Annan. But compared with Xianyuan City, which was in full swing, the construction of the two cities occupied by the Burning Legion was obviously not satisfactory. There were 6 cities in Tiannan. While other cities were striving for stability and development, Xianyuan City was already on the road of rapid development. It had money, people, and power. In the barren land of Tiannan, Xianyuan City was like a pearl. Everyone could see its existence and understand its future. Xianyuan City had limits. But Emperor Dong's palace wouldn't have limits. When Xianyuan City was established to a certain extent with the support of massive funds, the next step of Emperor Dong's palace would inevitably be expansion. The so-called expansion, whether for Heaven Capital, Freedom City, or the Burning Legion, was tantamount to invasion. Wang Xingxiao's trump card was in Tiannan. Did he want to help Emperor Dong's palace unify Tiannan so that he could get the full support of the giant group? While he was thinking about it, he also asked the question. Do you think it's feasible? Wang Xingxiao looked back at him. Wang Jingxin narrowed his eyes, thought for a long time, and then said in a low voice, "This is raising a tiger. Whether it's raised or not, a tiger is a tiger." Wang Xingxiao said blandly, "And if Emperor Dong's palace is a tiger, it's not our turn to raise it now. What we need is cooperation." When a complicated situation became simple, the solution to the problem would also become clear. In the past 6 months, the Giant Group and the Southeast Group had a pleasant cooperation and carried out internal reshuffling. But both sides were very clear that their cooperation would end a year later. At that time, the Giant Group would no longer need the Southeast Group, and they were doomed to go their separate ways. But in the foreseeable future, the Southeast Group still needed the support of the Giant Group. After all, in a turbulent situation, neutrality often meant cowardice, especially in the face of huge interests. Once the Giant Group parted ways with the Southeast Group, it was very likely that they would attack the Southeast Group in the next second. The Southeast Group must unite the Giant Group by its side. The intention of the internal reshuffling of the Giant Group was very clear, and Dongqing Wudi was also very determined. In this case, it was only a matter of time before Li Tianlan left the desert. If he hadn't cooperated with the Southeast Group, Li Tianlan might have come out now. It was said that a month ago, Hua Zhengyang, the director of Zhongzhou State, personally visited Li Tianlan in the desert prison and intended to ask him to come out, but Li Tianlan refused. It was not that he couldn't come out, but that he didn't want to come out for the time being. Li Tianlan's freedom couldn't be used as a bargaining chip, so if they wanted to win over the Giant Group, they could only consider Li Tianlan's future. Unify Tiannan. This was a condition that neither Li Tianlan nor the Giant Group could refuse. Although Li Tianlan could also do this without the intervention of the Wang family of Beihai, it would take a longer time. Li Tianlan was only in his 20s this year. Taking over Tiannan in 3 years and taking over Tiannan in 5 years didn't seem to make much difference, but there was still a difference, especially for the future layout of the Giant Group. I should talk to him. Wang Jingxin said. Of course, I plan to go to the desert prison in the near future. Wang Xingxiao nodded and smiled. If you have time, Shun, if I have time, I'll go to see my son. Wang Jingxin took a sip of wine and suddenly said, what if the target is not Speaker One? Temporarily. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were gentle. Even if it's not, it's only temporarily. They will definitely keep a close eye on this position and won't let it go. So this time, even if it's not Speaker One, I will still talk to Li Tianlan. This is not the only way, but at present, it seems to be the most effective way. Wang Jingxin nodded silently. It was not easy for the Wang family of Beihai to stabilize the situation now. At their lowest point, what they had to do was to recuperate and keep their bottom line. In this regard, Li Tianlan was their natural ally. This was the same as when he killed Qi Mulan, the Wang family of Beihai took the initiative to help him. The significance of Tiannan to Li Tianlan was exactly the same as the significance of Beihai province to the Wang family of Beihai. Zhongzhou state could move the speaker of Beihai and threaten the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. In the future, it could move the speaker of Tiannan and threaten the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace, and vice versa. But there was a premise. That was the significance of Tiannan to Li Tianlan. It was not the significance of Xianyuan City to Li Tianlan. At least, it should not be just Xianyuan City. Everyone understood this truth. Therefore, Wang Xingxiao was still relatively optimistic about the upcoming negotiations. Wang Jingxin drank the wine in the flagon in silence. Suddenly, he laughed and changed the topic. Go to my house when you leave. Your sister-in-law made a few pairs of baby shoes for Haotian. They are very comfortable. Just take them as gifts for the child. Thank you. Wang Xingxiao laughed. Thinking of his newborn child, his eyes were a little dazed. He had not really seen his child. But the little baby in the video seemed so fragile to him. Wang Xingxiao was very clear that if the Wang family of Beihai could survive the current difficulties, then in the near future, 20 or 30 years later, the very fragile baby would also carry more and more things. Just like his whole life. After standing in this position for hundreds of years, every clan leader seemed to be shouldering far more than what they had obtained. Wang Xingxiao glanced at Wang Jingxin. His eyes were a little tired. At this moment, he thought of many people. Many, many people. The ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai, the names on the stage of formidable person, Wang Jingxin in front of him, the 7 major sword-holding families. He thought of himself, Wang Tianzong, Wang Xiaoyao, and Wang Qinglei. Hundreds of years were like a chessboard. Different people in different eras played different chess pieces on this chessboard. Before walking on the stage of formidable person, Wang Xingxiao felt that it was glory. But sitting on the stage of formidable person for half a year, he began to think again and again whether it was worth it for so many people to sacrifice without complaint or to betray at all costs. He suddenly thought of the night before he left Eastern Europe half a year ago. That night, in Fanio City, he was drinking with his second uncle. Looking at Wang Xiaoyao, who was getting more and more gloomy, he calmly told him that his father's injury was very serious, even at the juncture of life and death. That night, Wang Xiaoyao just drank quietly. It was not until he got on the plane that he said something faintly. An extremely indifferent sentence. Life is like this. Death is death. Death was death. Wang Xingxiao smiled. No one knew what he was thinking at this moment. Death was death. Was it worth it? Chapter 770. There was no sound, no time, no direction, no light, no dream. His consciousness was clearer than ever. He kept falling in the darkness. There seemed to be no end to the falling. There was only darkness and silence around him. And pain. He didn't know when the pain started. At the moment he felt the pain that seemed to tear his whole body had spread all over his body. It was not as if. It was a real pain. That tearing feeling was extremely clear, like the most precise instrument in the world. The instrument enveloped his body, tearing at every corner of his body, inside and out. The cycle repeated endlessly, and it was extremely sharp and fierce. His brain, limbs, and torso. The pain was everywhere. Every inch of his flesh and blood was torn apart. It was as if thousands of swords were pulling on his body. His skin was torn to shreds, and the swords pierced deep into his flesh, tearing apart his blood vessels. Blood seemed to flow out, and every inch of his muscles was torn apart by the swords. The fine sword intent was not surging. It was not like a big river, but like rain. It fell from the sky. Endless rain. The rain-like sword intent kept cutting every bone in his body. The sharp sword energy seemed to penetrate into every cell in his body and finally into his soul. This was a torture more terrible than death by dismemberment. Every minute and every second, his body seemed to be torn apart alive. The absolutely strong willpower made it impossible for him to lose consciousness. The pain that went deep into his soul made him scream and twitch wildly in the darkness, but he couldn't make any sound at all. This darkness seemed to be infinitely vast. It was absolutely silent. There was only darkness. The sound of blood flowing seemed to be an illusion, but it also seemed to be really echoing. The intense pain that made people crazy tormented his heart and mind tenaciously with his heartbeat. The pain had reached the limit. Everything had become numb. The darkness became chaotic. Amidst the long silence, the tearing pain started again. The body that seemed to be cut into powder seemed to be reorganized again, and then it was the most cruel torture. There was no sound, no time, no direction, no coma, no light, no dream. He was falling forever. It was like an eternal sinking. Again and again. He couldn't remember how many times he had been tortured, and he didn't even know how long it had been. 3 days. 3 months. 3 years. Even 3 centuries. Long, desolate, and silent. Countless tortures always came again when his numb body forgot the pain. It was sword intent. The vast and boundless sword intent was close to eternal sword intent. It was like the endless 6 paths of reincarnation, and also like the sharp and fierce 24 moves of sword. Countless sword wills were like tiny runes, like Mount Shu, like the Jade Pool, like the way of swords from all over the world. Yes, the way of the sword. There was no difference in swordsmanship. This was neither the 6 paths of reincarnation nor the 24 moves of sword. This was the pure path of the sword. It was the simplest, but it encompassed everything. That was why it was perfect. The seemingly fine and weak sword intent was wreaking havoc in every part of his body. His powerful life force continued to heal, and then he was torn again and again, and then healed again. The sword chi was endless. But his life force was getting weaker and weaker. Under the almost uninterrupted pain, he constantly struggled on the verge of death. After an incomparably long time, he seemed to have forgotten who he was and where he was. Only his survival instinct was still supporting him. Live on, live on. The first wisp of life force poured into this dark space like a sweet spring. Like running water. There was more and more running water, more and more rapid, and finally it became a vast ocean. The sword chi did not weaken at all, and it was still constantly circulating. But the healing process of his torn body was constantly speeding up. And the speed of the sword chi tearing his body was a little slower. His body was still falling in the darkness, but he had begun to try his best to control his body. He really tried his best. The pain became even more distinct and unrelenting. His flesh and blood seemed to be gradually merging with the majestic vitality. The speed of the sword chi tearing his body was a little slower again. He didn't know his current state, and he didn't even know what his current fall meant. He just wanted to leave this crazy darkness and regain control of his own body. Move. Even if he just moved a finger. Try. He kept trying. In the dark space of eternal fall, a storm of sword intent appeared one after another. The almost world-destroying sword chi did not stir up any waves in the dark space. There was only silence here. Thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times. The truly indestructible will supported him to keep trying, and it eventually became instinct. The sword chi was still endless, raging constantly. When the excruciating pain exceeded a certain limit, he finally felt his broken body. That feeling was not the feeling in the darkness, but a very clear perception. The fall stopped. He stood in the darkness, feeling the crazy sword chi raging in his body. His whole body trembled, but he could not make a sound. So he stood where he was, feeling the pain, and took a deep breath. Bang! There seemed to be a slight sound in the dark space. The sound was very light, as if it came from a distant place. But in this almost eternal silence, this voice was like a clap of thunder. This was the first sound he heard. Bang! Another sound came. In the darkness, a softness surged over and completely wrapped his body, like a viscous sea. He vaguely remembered a picture. In the cold sea, the great pressure pressed on him like the world. Behind him was the submarine. His body fell on the surface of the deep sea, walking forward step by step. Then what? He tried hard to think. It seemed like it happened a long time ago, but it also seemed like it happened not long ago. Then, in the deep sea, he struck with his sword. In the dark and viscous water, he stretched out his palm subconsciously. Where is the sword? The water rippled slowly. In an instant, light appeared in the boundless darkness. A cold and majestic sword gleam. Sword. Countless swords filled the entire darkness with a single thought from him. The pain became clearer. But his mind became extremely calm. He had no choice. In the darkness, the sky was filled with sword shadows. He picked up a sword casually. The blade trembled slightly. When do you plan to go to the desert? On the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Jingxin tidied up the food box and asked, "Don't you want to go with me?" Although he was a high official, he was not good at drinking. He drank a lot tonight, so he was obviously a little drunk. His body looked shaky, but his mind was very clear. "I'll wait here." Wang Xingxiao shook his head. "Now we don't know the specific plan of the other party. If we go to see Li Tianlan rashly, we won't get any results. This is a game, but first we have to see the means of the academics and the prince group, estimate the price we and the giant group have to pay, and plan an expected result. If everything is within the acceptable range, then the deal can be made." "Now how?" "I can tell Li Tianlan what I can give him, but I can't tell him what he and the giant group will lose. Such a cooperation will not work out." Wang Jingxin was silent for a while, then nodded and said, "That's right." Wang Xingxiao chuckled and said, "Well, it's late. Take a rest. If I disturb you, sister-in-law may scold me." Wang Jingxin laughed and waved his hand. "Let's go." Wang Xingxiao nodded and suddenly said, "Before going to Jianghu, go to Yuzhou and see Minister Yi." "Yi Dongsheng?" Wang Jingxin was slightly stunned. It was almost certain that Yi Dongsheng would become a director next year. If there was no big accident, this result could not be changed. The so-called big accident was that the Wang family of Beihai would be completely destroyed at that time. Compared with the advance and retreat of Wang Qinglei and Wen Siyuan, deciding Yi Dongsheng's position in advance was a means of the Southeast group to stabilize the situation. Yi Dongsheng could be said to be the next flag figure and spiritual leader of the Southeast group. If she went to see Yi Dongsheng at this time, did he have any arrangement? Wang Jingxin looked at Wang Xingxiao with some inquiry in her eyes. Wang Xingxiao answered with a cold voice, "The matter of Jianghu can't be delayed. Get ready." Wang Jingxin's heart trembled. She nodded and said, "I understand." Wang Xingxiao smiled and raised his hand. It seemed that he wanted to shake hands with Wang Jingxin. However, he suddenly stopped moving. A gust of wind blew over the stage of Formidable Person. It was the highest place in Mount Dibbing, and there would be sea breeze all the time. But Wang Xingxiao instinctively felt that something was wrong. Because of the wind direction. The east wind passed through. But just at that moment, there seemed to be a reverse flow over the entire Beihai. The west wind wrinkled and was extremely cold. Wang Xingxiao suddenly looked up. The sky was full of stars, the bright moon, and the deep night. But everything in his sight became blurred. The whole space seemed to be distorted, and the world was in a trance. Wang Jingxin even thought that he had drunk too much. He shook his head hard. Wang Xingxiao tightly pursed his lips and did not speak. He silently raised his head and looked at the distorted heaven and earth. The west wind stopped. There was a sudden dead silence between the heaven and earth. The sword energy, which was so majestic that it could almost fill the heaven and earth, appeared silently over Beihai. It was densely packed. There seemed to be tens of millions of sword energy in the silent night sky in an instant. The sword energy floated quietly. More and more, it filled the space between heaven and earth. No one knew the source of the sword energy. The unimaginable sword energy instantly covered Beihai and the entire Mount Dibing. There was a dead silence in the sea area of tens of thousands of meters. Bang! Without any warning, the sword energy that covered the space of tens of thousands of meters suddenly vibrated. It was clear and stable. Supreme and supreme. The vibrating sound instantly spread from the deep sea to the entire Mount Dibing. It was like the heartbeat of the sky. Chapter 771. Yuzhou, Hidden Dragon Sea. The warm sunshine sprinkled in the spacious office. Behind the desk, Li Huaqing silently looked at the document in his hand, narrowed his eyes, and took a sip of tea. The content of the document was very formal, with the seal of the Wuxia Parliament. It could be said to be a recommendation letter, and it was a recommendation letter that did not go through the normal procedures. Wang Qinglei, the speaker of Wuxia, recommended the deputy governor of Wuxia to be the deputy speaker of a province in western Jianghu state. The provincial parliament was generally not qualified to do so, but Wang Qinglei was different. He was a member of Jianghu state. Therefore, although this recommendation letter had the signatures of most of the directors of Wuxia, it could actually be said that Wang Qinglei proposed a personnel transfer as a member of parliament. This document did not pass through the Ministry of Personnel and appeared directly on Li Huaqing's desk. In just a few hours, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing had received the news. The two sat face to face, thinking about the contents of the document, and no one spoke for a while. "What do you think?" Li Huaqing suddenly asked. "We can give it to him." Chen Fangqing didn't hesitate at all. On the way here, he had already thought of everything he needed to think about. Some of the possible consequences were also within his range of tolerance. He's under a lot of pressure now. It's equivalent to asking us for help. Plus, 1 year's time shouldn't be a problem. Wang Tonglu, Li Huaqing looked at the document and whispered to himself. Wang Tonglu was the deputy speaker of Wuxia that Wang Qinglei intended to transfer this time. He was one of the directors of Wuxia. He had served in Wuxia for a long time, deeply rooted, and highly respected. With his qualifications, if he wanted to be transferred, it was almost no problem for him to become the governor of a province. He was the backbone of the Southeast Group. If Wuxia had not suffered a major change, he would have been the best candidate to be the governor of Wuxia after Wang Qinglei left Wuxia. In the past year, the internal situation of Jianghu state had changed, especially in the past 6 months. In the turbulent times, Wang Tonglu, who had been favored by others, had become gloomy. The reason was actually not complicated at all. Now Wang Tonglu could be said to be the only capable general of the Southeast Group among the 13 directors of Wuxia. Wang Qinglei could also be said to be a member of the Southeast Group, but everyone knew that he had almost completely fallen out with the Southeast Group. Wang Tonglu was a capable general who was truly loyal to the Southeast Group and Mount Dibing. There were many such capable generals in Wuxia before. However, as Wang Qinglei's actions in Wuxia became more and more intense, such people gradually became fewer and fewer. After Yu Chuanguang, the former mayor of Huading, became the governor of Wuxia, Wang Qinglei was even more free. As a close friend of Wang Xiaoyao, Yu Chuanguang's arrival could be said to be a blessing for Wang Xiao. It was Yao's official statement. He and Wang Qinglei cooperated very well. In a very short time, they had completely cleared out the forces loyal to Mount Dibing. If Wang Tonglu left, for the Southeast Group, Wuxia, the most developed province in Jianghu state that they had held for hundreds of years and had always been their backyard, would be completely lost. This was the core foundation of the Southeast Group. Li Huaqing hesitated. He was not distressed for the Southeast Group. In fact, this was their goal, and at this point, there was nothing to be distressed about. The Southeast Group had long lost control of Wuxia, but Wang Tonglu was there. At least he could be regarded as a fig leaf. Beihai and Wuxia were the two most core places of the Southeast Group. Now, when they were preparing to target Beihai, they wanted to tear off the fig leaf of Wuxia. Li Huaqing felt that they had gone too far. He was the president, so he must take the overall situation into consideration. If this step was so intense, it would undoubtedly cause a backlash from the Southeast group, and the loss would undoubtedly outweigh the gain. Qin Fangqi knew his concerns. He hesitated and said slowly, "We still have to promise him. But the direction of Wang Tonglu's office is not very good. Let him be the governor. It is not appropriate to force him out and give him the position of deputy speaker." Li Huaqing nodded slowly. "I will communicate with Comrade Yi Dongxing on this matter later." Qin Fangqi nodded noncommittally. While supporting Wang Qinglei, he also had to take care of the face of the Southeast group. The current situation was too sensitive. They had to maintain the situation while attacking. As long as Wang Tonglu could leave, it meant that Wang Qinglei had completely taken over Wuxia. Moreover, they did not have to worry about Wang Qinglei covering the sky in Wuxia for the time being. After all, he only had less than a year. After a year, he would come to Yuzhou. At that time, Yu Chuanguang would take advantage of the situation and become the new member and Wuxia's speaker. In this way, Wang Qinglei's faction would have a member and a director. This kind of strength was already a new group that was not weaker than the North group. Therefore, this step of Wang Tonglu's was very crucial. As long as Yi Dongxing agreed, it was okay to give him some benefits to balance the situation. Now the biggest target of the academics was Wuxia and Beihai. Next year, the governor of Wuxia was bound to be vacant. Whether the academics would get this position or give it to the prince group would depend on their harvest in Beihai a year later. "We can give it to him." Li Huaqing finally nodded. "But he also needs to speed up his actions." Qin Fangqi nodded, held the cup, and said, "I'll talk to him. Beihai's conscription is getting more and more outrageous." Li Huaqing took a deep breath, and his tone was a little solemn. Now the scale of the Beihai Corps had doubled, and hundreds of thousands of troops were training all day long. The army could be said to cover the sky and the sun, and the scale of the maneuver was getting larger and larger. These were undoubtedly warnings from Beihai to Jianghu state. Wang Xingxiao's strength that time was not meaningless. At least now, when the academics and the prince group targeted the Southeast group again, they had begun to consider how to maintain the situation and take care of their thoughts. In the end, it was still the same sentence. Jianghu state versus Beihai. This was not a question of whether they could defeat them or whether they dared to fight. It was a question of whether it was necessary to fight. The answer was very simple. There was no need. There was no need at all. What they wanted was to control Beihai, that was all. But for Wang Xingxiao, he had his bottom line. There was no need to talk about the necessity of guarding Beihai. This was also not a question of whether they could defeat them or not, but whether they dared to fight. Wang Xingxiao dared to fight. He really dared to fight. The Wang family of Beihai had always kept a small number of nuclear weapons. The number of nuclear weapons was very small. If they were launched at Jianghu State was 100% sure that it could intercept all the nuclear weapons of Beihai outside Jianghu State, because they really did not have many nuclear weapons. But what if Wang Xingxiao wanted to use them in Beihai? No matter how few nuclear weapons they had, as long as they exploded in Beihai province, it was enough to completely sink 160,000 square kilometers of land in Beihai province to the bottom of the sea. The radiation and aftermath of the explosion could even affect Liaodong, which was closest to Beihai. If they really forced Wang Xingxiao to this point, Beihai province would be completely submerged by the sea and disappear from the map. Liaodong would suffer heavy losses. And what did Jianghu State get? Nothing was gained. This was not their original intention at all. Their original intention was not to destroy Beihai, but to control Beihai province. In this way, when Wang Xingxiao said that he really dared to fight, Jianghu State had to adjust its strategy. When their power expanded to the extent of the Wang family of Beihai, foreign enemies could bring them setbacks, but it was almost impossible to completely destroy them. The only way was to break their rule from the inside. Wang Qinglei. He was the most suitable candidate. As long as Wang Qinglei became the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, then everything could be discussed. Li Huaqing and Qin Fangqi were willing to support Wang Qinglei. But Wang Qinglei also had to do something to put great pressure on the Wang family of Beihai in other aspects. What's his plan? Li Huaqing glanced at Chen Fangqing and asked slowly. Chen Fangqing took a sip of tea and said slowly, I talked to him once before. He told me that in Europe, there is another His Majesty. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.